There is something about Dave Aranda that a lot of us forgot about, but it's going to be super crucial to Baylor's success this season. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. I will also be bringing you today's show, and my name is Cam Stewart. I am the host of The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. You might also know me from ESPN Central Texas on the Matt Mosley Show, weekdays 4 to 6. In today's episode, we are, of course, looking at football and the things that we can now admit about the 2023 team in the hopes that they will be different in the 2024 team. Plus, a Baylor legend said Dave Aranda's move to defensive coordinator was absolutely necessary. We'll tell you why he said that. And boy, talk about a murderer's row that Baylor men's basketball has going in that non-conference schedule. They just keep adding games and marquee matchups. We'll look over those as well. We are pretty close. We're pretty close to the 2024 Baylor Bears football season, which means it's now time that we can admit out there in public that some of the premonitions we had about the 2023 team were absolutely right. I heard this week, both from Dawson Pendergrass and from Baylor analyst and former wide receiver Ricky Thompson in an interview with Sikkim 365. We're going to talk about him as well in the second segment. But both of those guys said that being around the practice and the scrimmage, and we've heard this from other people this year too, that the energy is different. It's night and day from what it was last year. You can really feel it now. You can feel the energy in this team when they're practicing, and you can feel it from the coaching staff and from the players, and players are hyping each other up. Coaches are hyping the players up. It's this great big energy fest when it comes to these practices and these scrimmages. And I'll remember back to 2023 when Baylor was going through that 3-9 season and 1-7 at home. There were several people, not the least of which being myself and Drake Toll, who was the host of Locked On Big 12 and still going to Baylor games back then, where we pointed out during these games, even when Baylor would make a big play, where is the energy on this sideline? Why are the guys not getting excited? What is happening? That's a weird red flag. That is a red flag for a college football team and really any successful sports team. That's why I don't see it on successful sports teams. Of why aren't these guys getting excited for their teammates or when their team is doing something? It felt very weird. And Drake was saying it. I was saying it. There were some other people who were up in that press box that were saying it publicly or privately that, this is odd. There doesn't seem to be an energy with this team. And yet when we put it out on social media, some fans agreed, and a lot of people would chastise us for it. Including I heard from people within the walls of Baylor Athletics reaching out to me saying, hey, this isn't true. Why are you saying this? I'm like, look, I just call it like I see it. And again, a lot of you fans did agree. You're like, what? Where is the excitement? It feels like the fans in the stands of a 3-9 team have more excitement than the team out there on the field. That can't happen. And now, as we're 2.5 weeks away from kickoff in 2024, we are hearing from people on the team and people around the team that, yeah, the energy is way different. Way different. Ricky Thompson also said they look better coming off the bus, which is something that I think a lot of fans were getting on them for last year as well. You know, it looks like these guys are getting barreled over as men against boys. And there were a lot of young players out there for Baylor. But now we can admit that because we're close to 2024. It just goes to show that this 2023 season was hopefully an aberration. Hopefully a one-off. Because there was negative energy around that team last year. You know, they didn't seem like they were ready to play. They didn't seem excited to play. And let me be clear on this. As weird as and backwards as this may sound, I don't even really hold that against the players. we all know, without having done it, most of us, that the student athlete life is a grind. Man, there is a lot going on. There's a lot you have to juggle, and there's a serious commitment you have to make to your university, to your coaches, to your teammates, and to your team in order to be a student athlete at a place like Baylor, Power 5, Division 1, but really anywhere. And so I know the players are out there and they're working. But that said, when it comes to an energy and setting a tone, and we'll hide behind the word culture for a program, that is on the coaches. You know what I mean? It's very easy for 21-year-olds to not have as much energy as they would have if their team was 6-2 versus when they're 2-6. That's up to the coaches to have them ready to play, first and foremost, which they didn't last year, and to have an energy within those walls. And we have heard that that's now here. We see it in all the videos that Baylor puts out. And once again, that is a big Keenan Hall thing, by the way. You can see it. I don't need sources on that one. You can see it on the practice field. It's not just Keenan Hall, but he is one of the people that is the most fired up. And Richard Reese talked about that this week as well. He said, yeah, he is always getting us ready to go out there. We want to run through a brick wall when he's getting us fired up, walking from the meeting room out to the practice field. I just find it funny that this was something that some of us media members and some fans on social media were getting dragged for by saying this team does not have an excitement level. And now here we are 2.5 weeks before the next season. And it's fair to admit, yeah, they didn't have the excitement level. It's a new page, but it was palpable. And it stunk for a lot of the people that were out there in the stands 5 minutes into the game. And like, oh, they just don't look alive out there. And when you realize how much the student athletes are putting into this, you feel bad for them too. You say they deserve a little better than this. And Dave Aranda shook up his staff once again. And now we have energy. Do they have the roster? Do they have the experience? That remains to be seen. But that to the right crowd gives a little bit of optimism. And the way I take it is a little bit of optimism in that it should be a little better than last year. How much better? We'll see. We will see. Because we still don't know who the quarterback's going to be. We don't know how quickly this offense is going to take off. We don't know the offensive or defensive line, how potent they are. Big question marks. We don't know how these young guys will take the next step. A lot of it's unknown. And we're going to, I was going to say we're going to find out in 2.5 weeks, but hopefully we won't find out much against Tarleton. Because from a fan standpoint, you can really only find negatives in a game like that. Look to 2023 on that. But there is another change in this Baylor football team that people should get excited about. And I will try to get you excited about if you aren't already. We're going to talk about that coming up after we hear from our friends at Gametime. It is Gametime. It is the sponsor of today's video. And if you are looking to go to somewhere where you need a ticket, I'm talking sports games. You want to catch a couple games at the ballpark for the stretch drive for one Texas team and for September call-ups for another Texas team. Or you want to go to a comedy show, theater event, anything like that. Gametime is the place that you need to go buy tickets. It's the only place I go to buy tickets. And if you don't want to hassle, you go to Gametime, because when you go in the app, you see the all-in pricing right away. The price you see is the price you are going to pay. And the view from your seat is going to be the view from your seat. Revolutionary, but Gametime does it better than anyone else does. They've got flash deals and zone deals going on throughout the week, and they're also the best place for last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off by buying last minute for any of those events: sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all that stuff. Comedy, theater, comedy and theater. All of it. And it's got the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code. That's LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Bang! For $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So I talked about this Ricky Thompson interview. I'm going to talk about it a little more. This was on the Sick 365 afternoon show, The Smokes and Paul Catalina, and it's a good interview. It really is. Ricky is insightful on what he saw at the scrimmage last Saturday. And let me just say this first: for a small school with, let's be honest, overall not a great athletics tradition, Baylor's got some pretty good color analysts. Ricky Thompson down on the sideline for football, JJ Joe up in the booth, and I'm a big Pat Nunley fan too for men's basketball. Some real good analysts across the board. And Ricky Thompson had this very enlightening interview about what he's seen in this team through fall camp. One of the things he mentioned was the energy and how that's shifted from 2023 to 2024. Another thing he talked about was Dave Aranda. He also talked about how the guys look coming off the bus. But another thing he talked about was Dave Aranda. And he said that Dave Aranda moving to defensive play caller is, quote, absolutely something that needed to happen, end quote. And there's a couple different ways you can look at this Dave Aranda switch to defensive play caller. You can see it as a desperate coach really trying to keep his job. You can see it as a coach who maybe doesn't want to be a head coach as much as he wants to be a defensive coordinator. You can see it as needing to move on from a first-year DC in Matt Powledge, who's still the DC in name, but you need the head coach to call the plays. And there's a modicum of truth to all of that. And I think if you ask Dave in an honest moment, he'd say, yeah, I'm coaching for my job here. And he's like the guy he's like the woman in the commercial who becomes a scarecrow because she's the only one who could do the job. Whatever that was, hotels.com or something. Dave, in a moment of truth, would probably tell you that. And that's actually fine. I don't mind that. And I think what we have forgotten about Dave Aranda is he is a defensive mastermind. You look at his head coaching record and you watch Baylor over the last few years, and the defense was not good the last 2 years. You would say, no, that's old news, Cam. He's not a defensive mastermind. We don't see it on the field. And that's easy to say for a head coach who's not calling the plays, right? In 2011, the New England Patriots went to the Super Bowl, and if they had won, it would have been the worst statistical defense ever to win the Super Bowl. But no one was saying that Bill Belichick was not a defensive mastermind. These things just don't go away. The game has not passed him by in terms of the defensive side of the football. I'm old enough to remember in 2021 some excellent Dave Aranda game plans that led Baylor to their best season ever. And I look at the numbers from his time as a defensive coordinator, and yes, y'all, we have forgotten how good a defensive mind Dave Aranda is. Okay, this is incredible. In 6 seasons as defensive coordinator at a Power 5 school, leading up to his time being hired at Baylor, Aranda's defenses were ranked in the top 12 nationally in total yards 5 times in 6 seasons. Okay, they also ranked top 10 in scoring 4 of the 7 seasons leading up to his hiring at Baylor. And since he took over as a full-time DC at Utah State, that was 10 years ago, Aranda's defenses gave up a touchdown or less in 48 of 108 games. Man. In his first 2 seasons at LSU, his defense allowed just 20 passing touchdowns. With the 11 they allowed in 2017, tied for 5th nationally. In his first season, they had one of its best ever performances as the unit and finished the season ranked among the top 3 in the SEC in 4 major defensive categories, a feat that no team had accomplished since 2006. They allowed the fewest touchdowns nationally and the fewest touchdowns per game in that season. They ranked 5th nationally with 15.8 points allowed per game and 10th in total yards allowed. They held 9 of 12 opponents to 1 touchdown or less. And when he was at Wisconsin, it may be even better. They allowed an average of under 290 yards per game, which was first in the nation over his 3 seasons at Wisconsin. They allowed less than 17 points, which was 2nd nationally in that span, 180 passing yards, 3rd ranked nationally in that span, and 109 rushing yards, number 4 nationally in that span. And Wisconsin went 30-10, went to the Big Ten championship game, and 2 New Year's Day bowl games. In 2015, Aranda's last season at Wisconsin, they led the nation in points allowed at 13 points a game. They ranked number 3 in the nation in total defense, number 4 in rushing defense, and number 7 in passing defense. This guy was elite at coaching defenses. Do not get it twisted. He was the most sought-after defensive mind in the country when he went from Wisconsin to LSU. And in that time, in that 15 to 17 range, there were 2 guys that were defensive coordinators that were the hottest defensive commodities on the market. They were Dave Aranda and they were Kirby Smart. Kirby's had a little bit more success as a head coach. But that's the kind of company we're talking there. And I know there are some of you right now typing into the comments, Cam, what about Kevin Steele? What about Rex Ryan? What about these guys who can just only be coordinators and not head coaches? That's something that is true. We've seen that in the football world all the time. People said it about Nick Saban when he coached the Dolphins. Some guys are just born to be coordinators, or some guys are just born to be college coaches, not pro coaches. But as long as Dave Aranda is still coaching, the head coach of Baylor, as long as he is still the head coach of Baylor, the jury is still out on that. Has his record been good? No. I wanted him fired last year at the end of the season. I didn't think this was going to work. But if you had told me, Cam, you have no control over this, Dave Aranda is going to be the head coach next year, but also we're going to make him the defensive coordinator, and we're going to bring in a guy who is one of the best OCs in the country and has also had some head coaching experience, how would you feel about that? Sign me up. If I have no choice in the matter whether Dave's going to be the head coach or not, this is the scenario that I would like. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I just read off the numbers. Like, this is what this guy's bag is. That said, again, which I've said all offseason, if they go 3-9 again or 4-8, I'm not on the Aranda bandwagon. But you are putting this guy in a position that he has been ultra successful in. Now, I do wonder, had he gotten the defensive coordinator position right at all up till now? Ron Roberts had a lot of success in that 2021 season. But I can't be someone who says that was Matt Rule's players. It's not a great mark on Dave Aranda, but it is on Ron Roberts. Can't say that. And then Matt Powledge, first year, I think a lot of the players like him, but he seemed a little out of his depth last year, and Baylor seemed a little out of their depth last year. So maybe it's just been a case of no one can do the job better than he can. At least that's what I'm hoping at this point, right? But the bottom line of this is, in the situation, in the scenario that we had and have, where Dave Aranda has to still be the head coach for Baylor, Ricky Thompson makes a great point. Then we need to put him where he is successful. And as a defensive coordinator, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone more successful than him in the last decade and a half in college football. That's what he can do. That's what he brings to a team. That's what he brings to a program. And if that's what it takes to get Baylor back winning again, Dave Aranda is the defensive play caller with a little assist from friend of the program, Gary Patterson, then I'll take that. By the way, why is Gary Patterson at practice? Overall, I don't mind because I like having Gary as part of this team. But something's not quite adding up there. Something is not quite adding up to him leaving early, and everyone still loves him, and he's a friend of the program, and he just happens to be down at practice this week. There's something amiss there. I'm trying to figure out what it is, but there is something amiss there. I could smell it. Okay, Baylor men's basketball, very good. I don't know if you guys knew that. And they're going up against some very good teams in this non-conference schedule. I love the way Scott Drew thinks. This is another hyped up offseason for Baylor basketball. We've talked about the transfer portal additions ad nauseum. This is a team that is going to be ranked in the top 5 in the preseason poll and will be one of the 2 or 3 favorites to win the best conference in college basketball. But how do you get ready for such a good conference? How do you do it? Scott Drew might be laying out the blueprint, because this week we have heard rumors and pretty much everything almost official on who some of the teams are going to be in this non-conference schedule. Anytime, anywhere. That's what it says in the pregame hype video. And that's something we've seen Baylor live out specifically in the last 5 years, but really the whole time Scott Drew's been there. He has not been afraid to play anybody. And you want to see anytime, anywhere put on the schedule, it's this. Because before you're even done with your Christmas shopping, they will have faced at least 2, maybe 3 Hall of Fame coaches and the 2-time defending national champions. Because in the Bahamas, you've got Rick Pitino's St. John's. On December 4th, you're going up to Storrs, Connecticut to play Dan Hurley and the UConn Huskies, the team that has won the last 2 national championships. In their barn, you're going to play them. And before all of that, the opening week of the season, Scott Drew said, we opened up with Auburn last year. Team that was one of the best of the SEC. They were what, a 2 seed, 3 seed in the tournament? And he said, that's not good enough. This year, we're going to Vegas and we're going to play Gonzaga again. Anytime, anywhere. Top 10 Gonzaga. Top 10 UConn. And Baylor's going to be in that top 10 too. I love it. I love it, John. And I like that. I guess I'll stick with the theme. I love that they keep lining up Gonzaga. It's great. It's great. It's 2 coaches who are obviously very close friends, Mark Few and Scott Drew, that love playing great non-conference competition. And they put up. They don't shut up. They play each other. And I thought I gave a lot of kudos to Mark Few playing Baylor in December of 22, not that long after losing to them in the national championship game. A lot of the players still the same. Timmy was still on the team. Like that takes some guts, because there's a lot of skeletons in that closet, a team you lost to in the national championship game in the manner that you did, in the context in which you did. You know, you were going to be one of the best teams ever and just got smacked from minute 1 against Baylor. So I love having Gonzaga on the schedule, because it gives me a chance to talk about that night again. It gives me a chance to watch the highlights. It gives me a chance to watch them on national TV and have the national TV station show the highlights of that game. I like it a lot. And it's the ultimate being thrown into the fire. And I can't wait for that game specifically. UConn is the big one, right? That is going to be a ton of fun. Early December in Connecticut. My goodness, I'm going to have to pull all the strings I can to try and get there. But Gonzaga, in the opening week, this is taking a team that has a blend. They're not extremely young. They're also not haven't played together for 4 years. This is a team that has some guys from last year, a couple of contributors who are freshmen, big-time contributors you expect, VJ Edgecombe, Rob Wright, and we'll see about Asamoah. And transfers you have brought in, some like Jalen Celestine, who's never played the NCAA tournament, and some who have been to the Final Four, like Jeremy Roach and Norchad Omier. You can't simulate 2 or 3 years of playing together in the summer. You can't do it. But what you can do is schedule tough early in the season and make this team come together. Make this team learn some lessons. And as good as I think this Baylor team is going to be, they're not going to be undefeated going into that conference schedule. No way. They're going to take some lumps. They're going to learn some lessons like they did last year. And hopefully, that makes a difference come March. Let me know what you guys think. What is the game you have circled on the basketball schedule? That's not a conference game because we know about Kansas at home and Houston away this year. Things like that. We know that's circled. What are these non-conference games that you have circled? Scott Drew taking down Rick Pitino. Good beats evil. UConn away. Gonzaga in Vegas. Let me know down in the comments below. And what do you think about Dave Aranda making that switch to defensive coordinator? This is not blowing smoke. I really think that is a good thing. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it doesn't work, I'm okay with you losing a shootout, but you had the best 6 shooter in the county. I'm okay with that. And let me know what you think about all that and Baylor's energy and how that's shifting. Let me know down in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell. If you're not with us on YouTube, first off, you can find us wherever you find your podcast. I'm sure that's where you're at. You can tweet at us too at Locked On Baylor. But yeah, thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll be back tomorrow with some more football talk, of course, on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.